amazing place, amazing forum, amazing space for us to talk about all things AI. We want you to understand what AI is all about, where it's going, how we're going to get there as a human race. So today I have with me our special guest, Mr. John Down. I was about to give your background, John, but I'm gonna let you do that. I don't want to drop the ball. But we have a special guest here with us, John Down from the University of Portland. We're doing some really cool and interesting things around this space and in this technology. So we're happy to have you here today. Thanks so much for your time today, John.
Oh, well, thank you, Tremaine. Great to hang out with you a little bit here, talk about AI, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we jump in, why don't you give the people a little bit of your background and just the work that you do at University of Portland?
Yeah, so I'm a professor here in the business school. I primarily teach in the entrepreneurship space. I'm kind of going back to when I did my PhD in strategy and have done a lot of different entrepreneurial programs over the course of my career. About 20 years ago, started to do more around AI, looking at, where AI was going. Of course, back then we didn't have the generative AI that we do today, but I've definitely been paying a lot of attention to it. And, one of the interesting things about having been involved in AI for a fairly long period of time is to think about how long was it going to take before most people expected us to get to sort of, this idea of artificial general intelligence, right? AGI, where it's kind of as good as humans in most things. And, if you go back to like the 2015s, people expected that to not really happen for, 80 years, maybe the year 2100. So that has been just startling. And of course, now most people kind of expect us to get to a much advanced level of AI beyond what we have today by like the year 2030. And, and who knows where it goes from there, because it starts to kind of recursively improve and that kind of thing. So that's been really interesting to see that acceleration. And of course, that's what we hear so much today about the speed of all this change, right?
Yeah. I love talking to people who remember when, and we both got a few gray hairs here, so we both remember when.
I used to have gray hair.
Yeah. I'm not gonna take my hat off. I don't want to embarrass myself here, John. But when you can have the remember when conversation, I always think that it's interesting because you can really do a real-time comparison contrast in terms of what technology was doing then versus what it's doing now. And you are right. I mean, the acceleration of where we were 20 years ago to where we are today it's head spinning. It's mind blowing. I many people on the pod know I started my first tech company 26 years ago, year 2000. And that year we were working on streaming video. So this was streaming video 5 years before YouTube. And we're just coming off a dial-up internet. We're just, broadband is just becoming a thing. Back then, AWS and cloud storage, that stuff didn't exist. Smartphones didn't even exist. We were just getting off of flip phones and pagers, those types of things. So when I think about that time period, and for you to say, hey, I've been working in the AI space, really thinking about this technology since back during that time, I'd love to know what you think about when you compare both time periods, because of course the technology was different, but I think the excitement around, the impact that a technology could have is about the same, because we were thinking about internet and smartphones and, then, Facebook, social media, streaming video, all that stuff was a very exciting time. And I feel some of that energy with today, as we're doing the AI things. I'd love to hear your opinion about that, because you can have the way back when conversation.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And let's see, we had ChatGPT come on the scene in November of 2022. And it was so clear to me, having kind of seen what was going on, that there was going to be this massive acceleration. And in January of 2023, so just a month or two after that, I set up a company, and I chose to call it Generative AI Corporation, because I just clearly saw that this was going to be kind of a massive thing. And and then since then, of course, being on a university campus, there's been so many other changes that have happened in terms of how it's impacted teaching, academic integrity, being able to use AI to do assignments, and then, students that are still developing their critical thinking and their writing skills and all this capacity to learn and to do things, them even understanding that, okay, AI can kind of short circuit that, or it can become a useful tool to kind of help with learning. And that's really been a big challenge. And I think the thing that people are recognizing, that the idea of using this AI in a responsible way to, I like to say, make us smarter, not dumber on campus in my classes, that kind of thing. And it's been interesting to talk with students and to see how different students have reacted differently to, the opportunity. Some kind of diving in a class today, actually, there's a couple students on campus that are putting together a 24-hour hackathon called, they're calling it Hack Up for Hack UP here.
Okay.
And, and those things have been around for a while, but now it's so much easier to have people that don't really have coding skills and aren't really technically proficient at doing coding and developing and stuff. Through the use of AI, they can come and be major contributors to teams building stuff in 24 hours or less with these AI tools.
That is exciting. That is really, really exciting. That part of it, I think, is one of the more, I don't know. You guys know I'm an optimist, but that part of it makes me really excited about the future of AI, because it really unlocks a lot of the potential that people have, in terms of what they can do, what they can accomplish. Entrepreneurs can now prototype, very easily. To your point, John, those that are non-technical now can use things like vibe coding and, these types of things to get in the game, get in conversation with the software developer and, the folks that are more technical. I'd be curious to know, John, since you are on a college campus. So I speak on college campuses all across the country. And there are different schools of thought about how these campuses are reacting to AI. I spoke, I'm not going to say which college, but I spoke at one in Texas. And, before they brought me up to do the keynote, the lady that's running it, Dr. I'm not going to say names, but she, addressed all of the faculty. I was speaking to the faculty. So she addressed all the faculty and said, I'm still, the school is supporting you on whether you agree with AI or not. Either way, as a professor, the school is supporting you. So she was just saying that, in support of her faculty. And my thought process was, whether you agree with AI or not, like, I was taken aback, because I'm like, it's happening whether you agree with it or not. I think that conversation is 3 or 4 years old, whether you agree with it or not. Now it's happening. What are we going to do on the campus? So you're on University of Portland. Obviously, a person like you is much more forward thinking in terms of how this technology is being integrated in your campus. So what is University of Portland sort of stance on AI, and what are you seeing with your colleagues around the country and other universities?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we are definitely leaning into AI but still finding our way in terms of how to use it, right? Because some people, when they say, like, oh, I'm kind of against AI, they can be against some of the negative things that are already coming to pass with AI, right? I mean, things like hallucinations, bias, there's all kinds of issues around the data centers being built and energy and water. And, and that stuff is so rapidly changing as well in terms of how AIs are becoming more efficient. But still, there's these giant data centers that are getting built. It is going to impact energy and drive up, costs for other things. And, so there's a lot of that kind of stuff. And then, of course, there's other concerns, serious concerns about things like jobs and how much, will there be, what jobs will get basically done by AI, mostly done. And so those jobs might kind of go away, or at least a good percentage of them, and what other jobs might get created, and, to what degree can humans be in the loop and should be in the loop. So there are lots and lots of questions. And, there's just a lot of people probably across most campuses and some across here that are just like kind of overwhelmed by it all. There's a lot of stuff going on university campuses anyway right now. And then you throw this in and all these changes, and it can make for a pretty demanding, kind of tiring place, right? But then on the other flip side of all that is you see students like this HackUP that the students are doing. There's a couple of actually CS students and a couple of other students, I think, from arts and sciences. They're kind of leading that, and so they can do so much on that. And when they came into class this morning, just to make the announcement about it, I could tell the students in the class that were hearing about it, they were asking questions. They weren't technical people in this class. This was an entrepreneurship class this morning, and so it does open up so many doors. And when you're able to accomplish something using AI that normally would take you a long time, or maybe you wouldn't even be capable of, you're like, whoa, that is cool. So, there's all that. And it's just such a hard place to kind of totally get your head around, isn't it, with this, how you're feeling about all this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one thing that it sounds like you do is you sit right in the middle. So of course you deal with the faculty, but you also deal with the students. So you're able to see, the impact that it's having on the ground, but of course the struggles with the administration and with leadership, being able to really understand how we need to shepherd these students as they go, basically using this technology out in the real world. I would be curious also to know on that front, just kind of a part two to that question. The job market is made for people who understand how to use this technology. It is transitioning very, very, very rapidly, where you're going to have at least a cursory understanding of what this technology is. You're going to have to know how to do some basic form of prompting, these types of things to be competitive in the next phase of what the job market is. So, when it comes to that piece of it, we need to prepare students to be successful in the market. How are you all thinking about that? Because now there's a little bit of a forcing function. It's no longer conceptual. There's a little bit of a forcing function. If somebody graduates here after 4 years, 5 years, and they're not prepared for the job market, did we do a good job as a university? And not saying University of Portland specifically, but I think every university is really asking that question. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. I was just talking to the director of our career services center, and that's exactly what she's hearing from the hiring managers that are, and so, yeah, it's not enough just to sort of go through a traditional college experience anymore. When you come out the end, that is definitely going to be a question that is going to be asked of almost any major across campus. And I've been teaching this one credit class on how to use AI for quite a long time on campus now. I think this is the 6th semester I've taught it. And, there's some students in there. I like to start by kind of getting a sense of how much have you used AI. And it still surprises me that there's a lot of students that haven't been using it too much, although most do. I definitely don't want to make it seem like, because most students are using it. But, some students had sort of, not that they even thought that that they realized they could have used it for assignments, but they, again, recognized that they needed to, use their own brains and minds and not rely too heavily on it. Otherwise they could, But then when I asked them, okay, so why are you in the class now? And that was a big reason. It's like, well, I'm a senior, I'm graduating. And I realized that, hey, I'm already hearing from people as part of their applications, what do you know about AI? That kind of thing. So it's changed so quickly. That's the shocking thing, right? I mean, even last year, it was probably less than it is this year. And next year, it's going to be more than this year, right? So you're absolutely right that I think, those are some of the things that we're looking at here too, to expand offerings of classes and maybe building it in as a required piece. Because, there's a lot of other things that are required, obviously, for students to do. And at least part of it's going to be related to AI. And there's so many different spaces within AI, but you still have to have some fundamental knowledge of it when you're graduating. I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that, no matter where I speak at around the country, what university, what level they are, whether they're leaning in or whether they're a little more resistant, a little more traditional, it doesn't matter where they are on the spectrum. Uh, any leader that I talk to at any university cannot argue with the fact that AI is here and that students have to have some kind of cursory understanding of what it is to be successful in the job market. I think anytime I bring it back to the job market and students being successful getting jobs, there is a broad understanding that that has to happen. I think the trouble or the tricky part for universities is balance. Is just what you said. Balancing that. The pedagogy, balancing the research. The more Socratic way of helping students to tease things out and develop their knowledge and learning. How do you maintain the fidelity of that, while still introducing a technology like this on your campus? The other tricky part, I think, that adds a layer of complexity to it is that either way, they've all downloaded ChatGPT and they, so it's kind of happening anyway, so it kind of puts the university, I feel like maybe in a little bit of a rock and a hard place, because they do want to be institutions of higher education, and not feel like they're shortcutting the system by introducing this technology, but you gotta have it, you gotta have it. So, I don't know what the future of education really looks like. I think that's a more broader question. Maybe I can pose that to you. What do you think the future of education looks like?
Well, just one more point on sort of integrating it into what we have now. One thing that's been pretty cool is our Dean of Arts and Sciences. She's someone that clearly recognizes this need, and she also does have a lot of faculty in her various departments in the College of Arts and Sciences, like in the English department and other places, where they're really, really concerned about students not being able to develop their critical thinking, because in writing classes, English classes, things like that. So she initiated this program where faculty can take workshops across campus, and part of this is to implement AI into at least a part of your class. So they're not talking about completely revamping classes, right? But figuring out how you can have an AI module that's part of your class. And we've been doing that now for a couple of years, and that's been working real well. The people that have started to do that, they do it an initial project idea, and then the next time they teach a class, they think about how they can do that differently, or maybe they're learning more about AI and do other things. So that's been really cool, and we'll see where that all goes. I personally, in terms of the future of education, I personally do think that as AI gets better and better, and it's still not great, but it's a lot better than it was a year ago, and it's going to be a lot better, and the stuff that's coming on now with the agents, and Anthropic came out with Claude Code and co-work, and the agents are getting better, and they're figuring out how to be more reliable and stay on task and check their work, and bigger context and all that kind of stuff. It's gonna get to where AI will be able to do most of the jobs that our students do now, and and so, well, what does that mean? Colleges are still going to play a role, and K through 12 as well, of course, but it's not going to be learning skills to be, let's say, an accountant, or just many other roles, because AI will be able to do a lot of that. And this is a little bit of that whole thing. It's hard to determine exactly what are the future jobs going to be, but and maybe if we're talking 5 or 10 years out, then hopefully we'll have some sort of universal basic income type system in place, so that maybe people are working a little bit and still have a lot of time to do other things that they find fulfilling and satisfying and rewarding, and that kind of stuff. And yeah, we're all going to have to learn how to do that, I believe, in the next 10 years.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're absolutely right. And I think we're both kind of high-fiving on this, in terms of two things. One is that education is shifting. I think we all agree on that. And two, the uncertainty of what the future actually holds in terms of things like the job market, et cetera. I was reading a article. This was probably like 2 years ago, and I can't remember who wrote, it might have been Harvard Business School. It was one of the research sort of universities did an article, and I was reading it. And back then, this was 2 years ago, they said that 40% of the jobs that are going to be available 10 years from now, 40%, that's almost half, that are going to be available 10 years from now, have not been invented yet. I was just, when I read that, I was like, what, talk about uncertain about the job, like jobs that haven't even been invented yet. And then you think about things like, prompting, prompt injectors, and, these new jobs that have just come about in the last couple of years that are paying six figures at these companies. I was like, that is such a true thing. And then, since we can have the way back when talk, you think about things like when social media came back. What was not a job before social media? Social media marketing, social media manager, social media, they teach courses on that at school. So it's like every new, sort of revolution in technology is going to bring these opportunities. And, but just that statistic, I was like, man, that's almost half the jobs that'll be available have not, we don't even know what they are yet, and that to me is very interesting.
Yeah. And the other big question there is, to what degree will AI be able to do those new jobs? And that kind of depends on how AI does develop, what happens in the sort of the robotics part of it, right? The robots, and there's obviously tons of work going on there. And so kind of getting back to why we're all really focused on trying to involve young people with AI and get them, integrated, and not just young people, but people in general, to be ready, because there is so much uncertainty about that future. And probably the best place to be is to have some knowledge and experience and a good sense of what is going on with AI, and helping to even develop the trajectory of how AI does develop. And that's sort of even a bigger topic about, things like how AI might be regulated, and all those kinds of things. You're talking about politicians and everything like that, right? So, but that's why I'm excited about trying to get more people involved in it, not only thinking about their own jobs and work, but then also kind of playing a role as part of society. And it's really a global society too, right? Because this AI isn't just going to respect national boundaries as it gets better and better. So yeah, there's a lot of big ideas and big things to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things I want to unpack there. I think that one, this technology makes the world very small. And I think just technology in general has shrunk the world, type of thing. But I think AI is going to be one of those things that really, really, really breaks down a lot of barriers that are in place. I mean, I think like AI has always been good at like language translation, pattern recognition, it's been good at those things for a while. I had a friend of mine that went to Japan recently, and she doesn't speak any of the native language there. And she said she was there for 10 days and had no problem. Everybody that is there, when somebody comes up and speaks to another language, they already have the apps downloaded. They, and they it's like a thing that's baked into the culture over there that, we can communicate with each other. She said she had no problem ordering from any restaurant. She had no problem catching the train and the subway to different places, the bus, and going to all of the different sightseeing. And she does not speak the language and was there for 10 days with her children. It wasn't even just like she's a backpacker, just wanting to, kind of be adventurous. No, she had the fam there and everything, so you want to be safe and you want to make sure everybody has a good time. She said, we did not have a problem because of AI. She said, everybody had the apps and we just conversed, and the translations were so good that we were able to get everything we needed to get done. So, that's just an example of, case study for what you just mentioned about how borders are really being broken down by this technology. And I think that lends to a second piece of what you said, which is, kind of aligns with how I feel about things, much more optimistic that, we want, I think the best outcome for humanity with this technology is if everybody has access to it, everybody uses it. And something you just said, John, I'm trying to get as many people as I can to understand the technology, use it, just get acclimated to it. I think that future is one that is very positive. What scares me a little bit is when you've got billions of people who don't know anything and a few people who know, use, build, and access and, manipulate the technology. That is the future that scares me a little bit. I'd love to hear your thoughts about, kind of, optimist, pessimist, what do you feel like in terms just overall about this tech?
Yeah, I think this sort of track that we're on right now, where we sort of see this AI arms race between the US and China, and between the companies as well, that obviously provides a lot of incentives to go as fast as you can and not worry too much about safety and some of these other things, right? And so, and so there's sort of like the political landscape and the sort of political competition, and then obviously all the financial competition, all the incredible money that's getting invested. So all these things are, I believe, are not good in terms of getting us to the most likely optimistic, great place. But however, I do see that changing. I think we can get off this trajectory a little bit, and more people around the world recognize that we have to work together. And right now the world is in this little bit of difficult situation. What's going on in Davos at the World Economic Forum right now, and how there's sort of this sense of countries kind of withdrawing and things like that. But that will change. I'm optimistic that that's going to change. And I think what you're saying about AI, it has a big potential of kind of like implementing or providing some impetus to get that change across, as more and more people recognize that, hey, this is just not going to work out for anybody. Even if you think, let's say you're in the US or you're in China or whatever, you think you're going to, win the AI race. It's just not, it's not like that kind of a race where somebody wins, right, and everybody else loses. So I think as more and more people recognize that we'll get to that sort of promised land of AI and the optimistic place. So, I'm an optimistic person, but I do feel like we do need to make some changes, and I think they will happen. It's just that we're not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, even though I'm an optimist, I am the first to say there are huge gaps that need.
Yeah, you're a realist as well, right?
Yeah, I'm a realist. I try to find the silver line and find the good, but it is definitely a lot of gaps. And one thing that you mentioned as we kind of wrap it up is the marketplace implications. You do have these trillion-dollar companies that are, in a race to win AI, the countries that are in a race to win AI. I mean, just my personal opinion, I think the only reason that the United States is even still in the race is because, 10 of the, 13 companies that are in the big race are US-based companies. We've got the innovation, but, to me, that part of it is something that has to go into the conversation. It can't just be about social impact. It can't just be about the people on the ground, because that piece of it drives markets. That drives, a lot of what. But to your point, just like your students, to bring it back home, bring it full circle, just like your students that are doing the Hack Up, competition at University of Portland there, now you can have somebody from the arts department, get together for somebody from the mathematics department and bring in somebody from the design school. And then, oh, and by the way, grab a fourth person from, the nursing school and come up with something really cool using this technology, building something out that could, and for all intensive purposes, rival one of the big guys. You know what I mean? I think that there is a future, a near future, where there is a unicorn, $1 billion company that's run by a company with less than 20 people in it. I think that that's coming. And, the first one could be in your Hack Up, event that's coming up. But just the fact that that's possible, I think is going to put pressure on these big guys who think that they're in a race for AI, because innovation can now happen at all levels. It's no longer David and Goliath. Everybody has the same tools that Goliath had. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which I think evens the playing field. Go ahead, John.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a great point. And, that right now it does feel a little overwhelming because most people are doing their regular jobs and they're trying to learn AI and figure out how to use AI. But what your point is that AI is ultimately going to allow us to step away from a lot of the kind of stuff that we've had to spend our time on. That's maybe the more mundane things. Even being a professor, I think that's going to completely change. And just what you were saying about how, it gives you more time to find interesting collaborations across campus and that involve people and AI doing really creative, cool things where, there's a lot of learning going on, and there's a lot of kind of sense of accomplishment and reward in the work that people are doing there. So yeah, I love that optimistic.
Yeah. I want us to win as a human race. So, I really want us to win. I really do. Not as a country, not as a U.S. I want us to win as a human race. You know what I mean?
Human race. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, John, listen, I really appreciate you spending time with us today. How can the people find you if they wanted to reach out to you and just learn more about what you're doing on campus?
Yeah, well, they can find me on LinkedIn. And also you can shoot me an email. I have a pretty, since I'm at the University of Portland, my email ends up.edu, and my last name is Down. So my email is down@up.edu. So easy to remember that one. Yeah, shoot me an email. Love to connect on LinkedIn and hear what you're up to and what you're interested in, whoever might be.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. All right, down@up. Yep. I like that. John, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you, Tremaine. My pleasure, 100%. Great talking with you. I always learn so much, so thanks.
Yeah, right back at you. I learned. I had my notepad out, even though you didn't see it. I was in class today. All right, guys. This is a Think Global Future podcast, and we'll see you on the next episode.